I put them in here. This is just a cap that I have where I submerge. There's some in here now, but I'll submerge 6 of these in here and let them sit in there for 2 to 3 days. Pull them out, tap them on the ground, because all the mill scale on the inside will come off as well, and so you'll have all this sludge. So make sure you kind of clean out the inside first. Let them dry a little bit on their own. I wipe them off, and then they'll start to flash rust real quick, but that's okay. So they you can see what they look like after they come out of vinegar. They're not super clean, but as an example, you can see where another piece of metal was lying on top of that, and the vinegar couldn't get to the surface. Same with these. But this light gray is a lot easier to polish. It's like a single pass, where this could actually end up taking you a lot of time to get off. There's another one where that's what it looks like. I only need to do one side because this bracket's, the other side goes to the wall. So I'll polish these up, and that'll be the final result before welding. You can see kind of like the flash rusting here that's going on. .3M bristle brush. It'll last a reasonably long time, but it'd less work on it. You'll spend a little bit more time, or in some cases a lot more time. Sometimes mill scale varies. It'll come off relatively easy versus you get some stubborn stuff there. I throw a little magnet here, just kind of keep it on there. The way these come from the mill, they're not completely flat from the outside edges to the inside. There's a subtle bevel. In some cases you can go over the entire set of them, but you can see like in the middle it wasn't cleaning up. So if you pull them apart and kind of hit it at an angle, you can kind of clean those up. Now you can see that the corners still have kind of that film on there. And I just use sandpaper. I keep my old used sandpaper pieces, because I'm never really sure when they're entirely worn out, or seem to find value in them at some point. But I'll just come around here and that addresses all the corners. So this one's ready. So I'll put this to the side, and I've got a set to assemble here, and I'll just finish up the rest and build those out. One thing I wanted to call out additionally was, despite that this area here didn't get as much vinegar attention, it still got some exposure to it, because I was moving the the items around, like kind of just shaking the container around here and there. But this darker spot will be easier to remove than it would be if there was no vinegar treatment at all. So it's still come off easier than before. I've run across some of this different metal that I've got from different places, and sometimes if you don't do something with it, it's kind of brutal to get off. Sometimes it comes off really easy. So the vinegar really helps kind of take off that initial stability from it. Next thing I'll do is clean up these burrs with a sanding disc. Typically a used sanding disc. I don't need a whole lot. Kind of just get this kind of mess off here off the edge from where the saw is, and then I'll put a subtle bevel on each side here, so when I weld it kind of, the weld will go kind of inside further into the metal and make more of an adhesion to it. We don't do it on the front or back because it's kind of the way angle is. Then I'll clean all these parts up with or these pieces with mineral spirits, let it sit and evaporate for a little bit, and then I'll start using the jig to tack weld them together. So I cut out 80 of these on the plasma table, Crossfire Pro. Cleaned off all the burrs, so when you cut metal, depending on your settings, you could get kind of this leftover stuff that you got to clean up. So I clean those up around the edge. It builds up on the edges, and then I polish one side because you can't weld to mill scale. And then these I cut a separate day, just with my metal devil. Set up a template of 2 feet, and then cut them and flip them. Then I made this jig here. What you do is you take these plates go on the end here, and that's what makes the bracket. You can use for a shelf or table or just shelving in the garage, but it's 14 gauge. Anyway, the process to this to kind of speed it up, when I first started making these, measuring half the distance, getting the center, and then measuring it here, to have a little bit of room for the weld and make sure it's centered and make sure it looks nice, and then tack it. And I'm holding it with one hand, and I have my helmet and everything, and so it took a while, right? It's my first. I've sold a number of these. I used to cut these out with the Metal Devil saw as well. Order 3/16 flat bar, then drill the hole. I went from using regular bits where you start with the pilot hole with the small bit and you work your way up to the desired hole size. Then I got a step bit, which I have a video on that, on how well that works, but that just kind of uses one bit and steps through each size. Well, that was getting tiring as well, so I was getting the Crossfire Pro plasma table just to to kind of evolve. So now I'm at the stage where I can kind of use this jig that I made to kind of ease the process. As I was saying before, it was really tedious by making sure it was centered. So I drew this up, which is one of these, minus a section for here. Drop this in here, and then I'll hit 2 welds on the back side of this. Turn it over and do it again on the other side, and then when I'm all done, I'll just come back and weld the rest of it. You can see they're just tacked on. You want to be careful, they could come off, but they're, you know, they're straight, right? I've had a few where they're kind of wobbly, but this is good. And then what I'll do is I'll come back after I finish the rest of them up, doing the same thing. I'll come in and weld up the rest around the front and back, and they'll be all done. Then the next step is I'll grind. I'll wire wheel, take a wire wheel and a drill, and just see the soot here. So without bending this here. See how that comes off. So now when you send the product out, it's completely ready for paint. You know, I could treat this for the customer and send it out if they want, but it's always kind of hard to figure out what they're going to use it for. If it's an outside product, I'd probably go get them powder coated for them. That, you know, that's additional cost. If they're inside, you can pretty much use anything and they'll last. They won't start rusting for. I mean, you won't have to worry about rust really at all, as long as they're in climate control. Here's a plate that I did not soak in vinegar, and I'm going to go over with the same 3M bristle brush just to show you how much more time it takes to get this mill scale off. You can see, like, there's still a little bit here and there, but it's a little bit of working. It's just kind of working it off. It'll eventually come off, and there's no way for me to tell which meal scale is more stubborn than the other. I mean, you really don't find out till you get there. So I mean, that's why I use the vinegar. Even if it doesn't bring it all the way off, I think you're better off.